So I just did the quick cold start and then hopped in here so we can give it a quick little drive, and I can tell you a little bit about the history of the car. So let me just get out of the driveway. Alright, so we're driving the 1990 944 S2. Currently the car has 1,988 miles on it, and the history of the car is as follows. So it was originally bought by a doctor in Connecticut. I know everybody loves the doctor stories, but he bought it as a graduation gift to himself, and graduating from med school, and he drove the car pretty sparingly over his 3 years of residency, according to his son. During those 3 years, between 1990 and 1993-ish, he put approximately 1,800 miles on the car, at least according to the last registration on the car, which was the 1993 registration. I'd imagine it was a few more miles after he registered the car, because when I acquired the car in the beginning, earlier in this year, the car had 1,965 miles on it, give or take. It had sat in a heated garage for that entire 30 years. And he essentially never drove it after 1993. It was never registered after 1993. The car never received any service during that time. It literally sat there, according to the son. It was cared for. It was in a heated garage, and about 10 years ago, he moved, downsizing, put a new set of tires on the car, and moved the car however many blocks away, and then it sat again for another 10 years. So when I acquired the car, first things that were done to it were draining and steam cleaning the gas tank, replacing all the necessary fuel lines, fuel pump, fuel filter, the sending unit for the fuel gauge. And then the car was trailered to Bill Rudner at South Shore Performance. Bill's a really well-known guy in the Northeast Porsche community. He's a Porsche racer, runs a race and road shop, and he's known to be one of those guys that knows what needs to be done, knows what doesn't need to be done. He tends to be fairly conservative with his approach, and I really like that about him. So sent the car to him. He gave it a good looking over. Obviously, he knew that he needed to do all the belts, and needed to flush and replace all fluids, which he did, along with air filter and plug wires and plugs and rotor and cap, and the basics. Brake pads on the car are actually the original brake pads. Rotors are the original rotors. They were all in fine condition. He saw no reason for them to be replaced, and neither did I, so we kept them. Other than that, he just went through the car. And so after Bill finished with the car, took it for a test drive, the car drove really incredibly well. I have another 944 S2, 1989, which is almost identical, except it's an 83,000 mile car, but it's an extremely well kept 83,000 mile car. And believe it or not, there's still a difference between the two cars. This car is so tight Nothing squeaks, nothing rattles. The suspension is supple. You know, it does exactly what you would expect it to do. It's a little bit of a time warp. You know, it feels like stepping back into a new 30-year-old car. You know, everybody knows the car's never going to be new after 30 years. You know, there's always some things that are going to degrade over that time. But I think that, you know, we did a good job of, you know, hitting the big points. From a cosmetic standpoint, the interior didn't need anything other than the cleaning and, you know, in general going through. The paint was pretty darn good overall. There were some areas on the hood that had some etching on the hood that it looked like either bird poop or tree sap had gotten on the hood at some point. And there were a bunch of small areas where the hood just looked etched. And originally my hope was that we were just going to be able to cut and polish that and get them out, but the etching was, you know, it did a pretty decent amount of damage just in those small areas, and only to the clear coat. The paint itself was intact, so I brought the car to Penn Collision. They're well known in Porsche circles around here as a Porsche body shop. They are a BASF grassroots paint shop, which was really important to me. And we went with the most conservative approach, which was to very carefully wet sand out the clear coat on the hood and spray new glassroot clear, trying to you know, minimize any effect that we might have on the value of the car, but, you know, giving it the, you know, the unblemished appearance that we wanted it to have. And I think we were pretty successful with that. That paint looks fantastic. We did detail the rest of the exterior of the car as well. But, you know, honestly, it didn't need a whole lot. And if you look at the other videos, I did shoot a video in my garage prior to the car going out for any paint work, because I didn't want there to be any confusion about what the quality of the paint was prior to me, you know, giving it any additional work. So to continue with the story, the physician, unfortunately, he ended up having a brain tumor, and his son acquired the car, and, you know, he was unable to get the car started. Obviously it hadn't been running some time, and he just really didn't know what he was dealing with at all. So I was very lucky in the fact that a buddy of mine who's an engineer and Porsche guy found the car, and I was able to acquire it through him. That is the whole history on the car. What I find to be really interesting is that if you look at the Carfax, presently there's no history on the car up until I bought it and registered it. And that might simply be that in 1990, you know, that the records for the car, that Carfax didn't go back that far and find those records. I'm not 100% sure. But, you know, it's not like it's not going to show tune-ups or oil changes, because they were simply never done. As a matter of fact, I think that when we drained the oil out of the car at South Shore Performance, I'm pretty sure that that would have been the original oil, or maybe maybe the dealership did the first oil change. And surprisingly, the oil was in good shape. You know, there was no sludge in the bottom of the engine or anything like that, which I think is fantastic. It's a testament to what the quality of the oil and fuel was back at that time. So sorry, these roads are terrible. After the winter, I'm on the beach in the Northeast, and the roads just really take a beating. thing that we did not address was the clutch. I have to believe that it's the original clutch. It feels fine to me, but depending on whether or not the new owner of this car is planning on driving it, or whether they're planning on storing it for future value, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to put a clutch in it. These original clutches were those rubber-centered clutches, and I think the modern clutches are much better. But again, that's up to the new owner of the car. Fortunately, these roads and this little island that I live on doesn't really give me the opportunity to open it up at all for you. But at least from my small amount of experience in the car, it does seem to make decent power, and it's doing everything it should do. Handles pin straight, shifts incredibly well. I mean, the gearbox is like tight and new. It's really pretty surprising. Downshift.